I'm Emily Harper, 34, and I never imagined that my father would ask me to leave his life. Growing up, we were close through suburban hunting trips, evenings where he patiently explained math problems, and the proud look on my face when I received my diploma. But this past year, my father looked me straight in the eye and said, "Don't come back." All because I refused to give him more money for an investment he thought was a sure thing. Despite that, I continued to support my parents financially. Then everything came crashing down when the investment failed, revealing secrets that destroyed our family forever. Before you tell your story, share in the comments where you are. If you've experienced the pain of a family falling apart due to financial pressure, don't forget to like and follow. Charleston, South Carolina was the setting of my childhood. The city, with its gentle rains that moistened its ancient oaks, seemed to foster a love of family. Our bungalow in the Ravenwood neighborhood was no mansion, but it was warm and welcoming. My father, Robert Harper, was a foreman at a small shipyard, his hands rough and smelling of sea salt and motor oil. My mother, Clara, worked as a librarian at the local high school, often returning with books smeared with student fingerprints and stories about mischievous children. As a kid, money was never a concern. The bills were paid on time, the refrigerator was stocked, and while we didn't own the latest gadgets, I never felt deprived. My most precious memories are of summer vacations at Folly Beach. Every year, my dad rented a small house near the beach, where we spent our days looking for seashells, building sandcastles, and watching the sun set over the ocean. Those moments were special. Dad left his work phone at home. Mom left her lesson plans. For 7 days, it was just the three of us, facing the world together. Standing by the beach, the waves lapping at my feet, my father would put his arm around my shoulders and say, "Remember, Emily, no matter how hard life gets, there is always something bigger than yourself." Those words have been etched in my mind, but now they carry a bitter tinge when I look back. My educational journey began with excellent grades in high school, consistently high grades, and culminated with a full scholarship to Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. The day I received my acceptance letter, my father, Robert Harper, taped it to the refrigerator as if I were still a fifth grader. My daughter, the first Harper to go to a prestigious university, he proudly told everyone he met, from close neighbors to grocery store clerks. The pride in his eyes motivated me to conquer any challenge. Durham opened a new chapter in my life. The economics program at Duke required a lot of hard work, but I persevered. I worked part-time at a local credit union where I learned practical financial management lessons that books couldn't teach. Graduation day came sooner than I expected, and my parents, Robert and Clara, stood in the auditorium, their eyes sparkling as I walked up to receive my diploma. "We didn't have much to give you," my mother whispered as she hugged me, her voice choked with emotion. "But you did it all." I wanted to say they gave me everything: stability, support, unconditional love. But the emotion left me speechless. The job market turned out to be even tougher than the tests I took in school. I faced 3 months of rejection, each rejection a mental challenge. Finally, Coastal Wealth Advisors, a financial firm in Charleston, offered me a job as an entry-level advisor. The starting salary wasn't high, but I threw myself into the job with the same dedication I had in school. I stayed late, worked weekends, and volunteered for complex projects. I was willing to do whatever it took to prove my worth. The effort paid off. Within 3 years, I had progressed from junior consultant to senior financial advisor. By my 29th birthday, clients trusted my advice, colleagues regularly consulted me, and management recognized my potential. Financial security, something I had taken for granted as a child, was now not only my expertise, but also my personal pride, a testament to my relentless journey. On visits home, I began to notice small but disturbing changes. The Christmas decorations that my mother, Clara, had meticulously put up each year were still stored in the basement. My father, Robert's old pickup truck, now looked shabby, with peeling paint and worn tires. The refrigerator was stocked with cheap groceries, not the specialty foods that my mother used to buy for her favorite dishes. When I mentioned these things, their responses were quick, overly optimistic. "We're just living a more minimalist life," my mother would say with a wry smile. My father would add, "Less stuff, less worries." I might have believed it if I hadn't discovered prescription pills on my mother's bedside table during one of my overnight stays, medications for a condition she'd never mentioned. Then I'd find a debt collection notice hidden under a stack of magazines while searching for a pen, or the silver tape patching the sofa in the living room. The recession hit South Carolina harder than North Carolina. Dad's shipyard had to cut hours, lay off workers, and eliminate the bonuses that had allowed the family to take memorable vacations to Folly Beach. The school where Mom worked froze pay, leaving her with no hope of ever earning more. They never asked me directly for help. Pride wouldn't allow it. But the signs of trouble were becoming more apparent. I tried to help by sending a check as a way of saying thank you for raising me. "We didn't raise you to be dependent on you," Dad said, handing the check back stiffly. On subsequent visits, I opted for practical gifts: a new set of pots and pans, a prepayment of the utility bill, a gift certificate to their favorite restaurant. Things that were hard to refuse without seeming rude. Mom accepted them with tears in her eyes, thanking me in a trembling voice while Dad remained silent, his gaze growing heavier with each gift. Eventually, I set up an automatic monthly transfer into their account, a small amount that wouldn't hurt Dad's ego, but enough to ease the immediate pressure. Mom called to confirm the first payment, her voice a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. "Dad doesn't need to know where the money comes from," she said quietly. "I'll say it's from my part-time job at the library." It was the first time Mom had suggested I hide it from Dad, a warning sign I should have seen. But at the time, I thought it was a practical solution, not realizing that these little lies would gradually creep in, contributing to the rift in our family. As my career was taking off, I met James Carter, a computer programmer whose calm and thoughtfulness matched my energetic personality. After 3 years together, he proposed on a weekend trip to Savannah, Georgia. The ring he chose was a simple, elegant design that sparkled, just the way I like it. We immediately called our parents to tell them the news. "That's wonderful, honey," my mother Clara said, but her voice was strained as if she were trying to hide something. "Congratulations," my father Robert added after a long pause, his voice strained. "James is a nice guy." Their lack of enthusiasm confused me for a moment, but I told myself it was probably just bad phone signal or bad timing. It was only later that I realized it was more complicated. Thanksgiving came 2 months after we got engaged. James and I packed our bags for the short trip, driving 4 hours from Durham to Charleston, eager to announce our wedding date and share our initial plans. The familiar streets of our old neighborhood greeted us, but I noticed more "for sale" signs than before. The family home looked more run down than I remembered. Sagging porches, peeling paint on the windows, and a weed-filled front yard. Mom greeted us with her familiar smile, but her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Dad's hug felt forced, his smile not reaching his eyes. Thanksgiving dinner told its own story. The traditional dishes Mom had meticulously prepared had been replaced with supermarket fare. The fine china was still in the cupboard, replaced by simple paper plates. Dad drank more beer than usual, one after another as we sat down at the table. To break the tension, I said, "We're thinking of a July wedding. Something simple, about 60 people, maybe in Charleston's waterfront park." Mom forced a smile. "Sounds great, honey." Dad, who was cutting into the meat, mumbled, "The park is expensive. The courthouse is nice enough." James squeezed my hand under the table, signaling calm. "We've saved up some money," he said, "and Emily's company is helping with the wedding." "Oh, that's special," Dad said sarcastically, pouring more beer. Mom glanced at him, then back at me. "How's work, Emily? All right?" "Very good, thanks," I said, relieved to change the subject. But Dad interrupted. "It must be great managing other people's money while us working people lose everything." "Robert, that's enough," Mom whispered, pleading. "What? Dad snapped. "Not everyone gets fancy office jobs and wedding bonuses." The room fell into a heavy silence. James looked down at his plate, and my mother, Clara, blinked back tears. I put down my spoon, feeling the tension building. "Dad, what's going on? Why didn't you tell me?" The question hung in the air, and it was a long moment before my mother spoke, her voice shaking. "Your father lost his job 8 months ago. The shipyards are cutting jobs in Charleston." My father glared at her, his voice harsh. "I was waiting for the right moment to tell you." My mother interrupted, her voice unusually high. "After the bank threatened foreclosure, we're 4 months behind on our mortgage, Emily. They just sent out the final notice last week." Her words were like a punch to the chest. 4 months. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I could have helped. We don't need charity, Dad snapped, his voice full of self-pity. That's not charity, that's family, I protested, my usual composure gone. Where are your savings? What about your emergency fund? Dad chuckled dryly, mirthlessly. It's all gone. The hospital bill took it all. I turned to Mom, but she avoided my eyes. What hospital bill? Are you sick? Mom hesitated, then admitted, I have arthritis, complications. Insurance only covers part of it. The rest is self-funded. Her voice trailed off. I'm working overtime at the library, but it's not enough for the medicine and the mortgage. James, who had been silent, finally spoke, his voice soft but firm. Mr. Harper, Mrs. Harper, Emily and I can help pay off the overdue mortgage so you can get organized. Dad pushed his chair back and stood. Do you think throwing money at us will solve the problem? That we need pity? No pity, Dad, I pleaded, my voice cracking. This is how we avert a crisis. Let me pay off the mortgage and then we can make a plan. A plan? Dad repeated, his voice mocking. You and your shiny financial plans. Mom took his hand, her voice pleading. Robert, please be realistic. The argument dragged on for several tense minutes, the air heavy with tension, until Dad's shoulders slumped as if admitting defeat. Fine. Do whatever you want. I don't care anyway. Relief mixed with pain flooded through me. I made a plan immediately. Contact the bank tomorrow, pay off the overdue loan, and help my parents restructure their finances. Mom thanked me with tears in her eyes, but Dad just nodded stiffly and left the table before dessert was served. As I helped my mother wash the dishes after dinner, I asked something that weighed heavily on my heart. Why didn't you tell me earlier? She scrubbed the clean pot, avoiding my gaze. Your father, he's too proud. He doesn't want you to think badly of him. I never thought badly of him, I said sincerely, though my heart was still in turmoil after the evening's tension. He's always been the one to provide for the family. It's hard for him to accept that I'm the one to help. I understood her reasoning, but it was hard to accept when I thought about losing our home. Mom, 4 months behind on payments is serious, I said, my voice cracking. Mom whispered, her eyes heavy. I know. I meant to call you sooner, but every time I tried to talk, your dad promised me everything would be fine. He told me about a promising interview or an acquaintance who mentioned a job opportunity. Mom put down the pot, her hands shaking. I should have been more firm, forced him to face the truth. James and I had planned to stay in Charleston for the weekend, but the atmosphere in the house was too oppressive. Dad kept making sarcastic remarks about city people and how I had easy money. Each one was sharper than he expected. When Dad sarcastically suggested that my success was due to pretty dresses rather than financial intelligence, I decided I couldn't stay any longer. We have an important meeting tomorrow, I lied, packing up early on Sunday morning. Mom looked at me, clearly not buying my excuse, but didn't object. Thanks, Emily, she whispered as she hugged me goodbye, her voice thick with emotion. See you around. Dad just nodded from his chair, his eyes glued to the basketball game on television that he didn't seem to be watching. As I left the house, I fought back tears, wondering how a family that had been so close could have fallen apart. James held my hand as we walked home, trying to comfort me. Your parents will be fine. When they get through it, your father will understand that you just wanted to help. I nodded, wanting to believe him, but deep down, I knew it was more complicated than that. The bank agreed to reduce the penalty fee after I paid off the entire past due mortgage and set up automatic transfers from my account. Then came the medical bills, a stack of papers thicker than I had expected, revealing treatments and medications that my mother, Clara, had never mentioned. For years, I had been quietly worried about my mother's health, realizing that her condition was a long-term issue. James helped me create a detailed spreadsheet to track every expense, helping me manage my growing financial commitments to my parents. Between the mortgage, medical expenses, and a small monthly allowance for food and utilities, nearly a third of my income now went to them. We were forced to adjust our budget, postponing plans to remodel the living room and cutting back on wedding expenses. I assured James that this was only temporary, until my father, Robert, found a job and stabilized. Dad never complained, but I noticed he was checking our joint bank account more often, with a small crease between his eyebrows, a sign of stress that had never been there before. Dad's job search was lackadaisical. He pursued a few positions, but was quickly discouraged by the low salaries or by employers' preference for younger candidates with more modern skills. Each rejection reinforced Dad's belief that the job market was unfair to people with his experience. Mom's health remained a major concern. New doctor's visits, new medications, and tests that insurance didn't cover, but doctors insisted were necessary. Whenever Mom apologized for sending the bill, I paid it without saying anything, not wanting her to forego treatment because of financial concerns. Our phone calls fell into a familiar pattern. Mom asked about my life and work with genuine concern, but always ended up mentioning an unexpected expense: car repairs, a property tax bill, or a broken appliance. Dad rarely joined these calls, but sometimes I heard him in the background, reminding Mom to add something to the ever-growing list of needs. 3 months after Thanksgiving, I drove from Durham to Charleston for the weekend, determined to fix the situation more thoroughly. My parents' house looked worse than it had the last time. The kitchen sink dripped constantly. The air conditioner whirred and whirred. Basic maintenance had clearly been neglected for years. "Let me call a plumber to fix this," I suggested, noticing that the faucet in the spare bathroom barely worked. "We already called an inspector," my father Robert replied, his voice dripping with contempt. "They quoted $20,000, wine $200 to fix the plumbing. That's outrageous." "Then I'll get another plumber to quote again," I said patiently. "We don't need outsiders in our home," he snapped, ending the conversation. That evening, I came across a receipt on the kitchen table, a $350 high-end hunting kit, purchased just a few days earlier. My mother, Clara, quickly tucked it away in a drawer when she saw me looking. "Your father needs something to distract him," she explained when he left the room. "He's depressed about his job search." I tried to contain my disappointment, wondering why someone who couldn't afford to fix up his house would spend such a lot of money. This wasn't the same father who taught me to save every birthday gift and think twice before making a purchase. The weekend visit revealed more troubling details. Despite their tight budget, they regularly ordered takeout from local restaurants. Dad kept his satellite TV subscription, complete with sports channels. Mom still made weekly trips to the salon instead of more frugal choices. When I gently suggested a budget adjustment, Dad bristled. "We've worked our whole lives, Emily. We don't give up every little pleasure just because of a temporary setback." I returned to Durham feeling confused and weighed down. When I told James, he said gently, "People deal with money differently. Maybe these things help them cope with bigger losses." "But I'm paying for those things," I countered. "That money could be going toward our future, or helping my parents in a more sustainable way." The engagement party we threw in May was a huge disappointment. 60 family and friends gathered at a cozy restaurant in downtown Durham, in a room decorated with photos of James and me documenting our love journey. Everyone who mattered to us was there, except my parents. The morning of the party, my mother, Clara, called to apologize. "The car broke down, Emily. Your father said it can't make it to Durham." "I'll call a car or buy a bus ticket," I suggested, "whichever way is more convenient." She said hesitantly, "No, it's too much trouble. We'll make it up to you next time we visit." I hung up, trying to come to terms with their absence, when a social media notification stunned me. My cousin posted a photo, tagged my parents, of them at a picnic right here in Charleston. My father, Robert, was grilling sandwiches. My mother was laughing and talking with the neighbors. The photo was taken less than 2 hours ago. The betrayal hurt more than I expected. They didn't even try to come up with a convincing excuse, or perhaps forgot that our family was still connected online. Whatever the reason, the message was clear. They chose not to come to my party. The party went on. I smiled for the photos, thanked everyone, and pretended that my parents' absence didn't leave a huge void. James's parents drove up from Raleigh, bearing thoughtful gifts and genuine excitement for our future. The contrast with my parents' attitude couldn't have been more stark. 2 weeks later, I drove to Charleston unannounced, determined to confront him head-on. The confrontation began as soon as I walked into the house. My father, clearly surprised by my appearance, said, "Why are you here so suddenly?" "Why didn't you call to explain missing my engagement party?" I replied, my professional composure gone. I saw the pictures from the picnic. "Dad, the car wasn't broken." Mom bowed her head, embarrassed. "We should be honest with you, Emily." "Yes, we should be," I said. "Like we should be honest about how we spend the money you send us." My father stiffened, his voice harsh. Now you're spying on us, controlling my money? That's not fair, Dad, I argued. I just want to help you get your finances in order, but how can I if you're not transparent? The argument escalated until my mother, Clara, intervened, urging everyone to calm down and take a deep breath. We sat down over cold cups of tea, and the truth began to emerge in pieces. The March mortgage payment I'd sent never reached the bank. Instead, my father, Robert, had used it to put down a down payment on a used truck, believing he could make money hauling freight around Charleston. He was convinced the business would pay off quickly once he got the trucking permit and started taking summer orders. He showed me sketchy notes about the business plan, but the truck, now parked in a friend's yard, had yet to make a single load. Meanwhile, the bank had contacted me directly about the outstanding loan, raising uncomfortable questions at the company about my reliability. This can't go on, I said firmly. I want to help, but not by making financial decisions that will get us into even more trouble. The conversation ended in a forced agreement. Dad reluctantly agreed to sell the truck and focus on finding more stable employment. Mom promised to be more open about their finances and needs. I pledged to continue to support them, but insisted that there would be clearer boundaries and expectations to ensure transparency. That evening, on the drive back to Durham, I called James, feeling drained. I'm not sure if I'm helping or abetting them, I confessed. You're doing what a loving son or daughter would do, James reassured me. But maybe we need a more systematic approach. He suggested consulting a financial advisor who specializes in helping families in crisis. A sensible idea, but one I doubted my parents would welcome. Still, the idea was planted, and it became important as things worsened. Planning a wedding should have been a joy, a way to ease family tensions, but every decision was overshadowed by financial worries and a rocky relationship with my parents. The venue at Charleston's Riverfront Park required a large deposit 8 months in advance. The guest list kept changing as I wavered between a large reception and an intimate ceremony. What kind of flowers do your parents like? The planner asked at a meeting. We could use them for the mother of the bride's bouquet and the father of the bride's boutonniere. I froze, realizing I didn't know the answer. Such details had never mattered in our real family. I called my mother Clara, but her response was vague and unenthusiastic. I'm not sure, honey. I'll think about something. My father, Robert, didn't answer his phone. Their indifference extended beyond the flowers. My mother said she would wear an old dress from her closet instead of buying a new mother of the bride dress. My father didn't respond to a text message about the song for the father-daughter dance. When James's mother threw a small bridal shower in Raleigh, my parents sent a gift in the mail but didn't show up, citing the distance from Charleston, even though James's relatives had traveled twice as far to attend. They're having a hard time, I told myself, trying to contain my mounting frustration. But watching James's family engage in wedding traditions with genuine joy, I couldn't help but notice the gaps in my own experience. One Wednesday evening in early June, just 3 months before the wedding, my father Robert called while I was cooking. His voice was filled with excitement, something I hadn't heard in years. Emily, I found an opportunity. It's going to change everything, he said, his voice cracking. An old friend from the shipyard, Michael Bennett, had pitched him on a business venture. Michael had a contract to renovate foreclosed homes for resale, taking advantage of the slow recovery of the Charleston real estate market. He needed investors to buy the materials and hire the workers, promising a 12% return within 8 months. There's room for 3 investors, my father continued, and Michael chose me because of my experience. I can even work on the construction sites, earning a salary and making a profit. My financial instincts immediately raised the alarm. Have you seen the business plan? What about the contracts? Did Michael provide the financial statements? Dad waved me off, annoyed. This isn't some high street scam, Emily. This is real estate. Michael has shown me some houses. But that's not what you're asking, Dad, I replied. A serious investment requires clear documentation. His voice cooled. I thought you'd support me. This project would give me a job back, some income, and use of my experience. I softened, realizing that he was not just looking for profit, but also a purpose. This could be a good opportunity, Dad. I just want to check it out before I make a decision. There was a long pause. Then the real reason emerged. The investment is $60,000, Dad said. Each of us contributes an equal amount. The amount stunned me. Dad, I can't spend that much money. It far exceeds the total amount I've given you in the past year. Dad insisted, this is an investment, not a beg. I'll pay it back with interest. You always talk about helping your family, right? This is a chance to really make a difference, not just patch up a gap. The conversation lasted nearly an hour, with my father, Robert, whose initial enthusiasm turned to manipulation as I expressed my misgivings. He recalled the years of sacrifice he had made to put me through college, the opportunities he and my mother had created, and my responsibility to the family. When I pointed out the lack of documentation, he brushed me off. Your financial education is textbook, Emily. You don't understand real business. He ended with a bitter note. If you're willing to spend money on a wedding dress and a fancy venue, why not invest in your father's future? I promised to consider it and discuss it with James, even though my professional intuition had already detected many signs of irregularity. The next day, I looked up Michael Bennett. It turned out that he had 3 failed business ventures and had been declared bankrupt once in the past 8 years. His business license had expired, and his legal records showed several unpaid debts to suppliers. Although I knew the risks, I worried that a flat refusal would further strain my relationship with my father. After discussing it with James and my financial advisor, I proposed a middle ground: a formal loan agreement at a low interest rate, with a repayment plan that would begin in 4 months. The agreement would require regular financial reporting and clear oversight. When I presented the idea, my father reacted sharply. "You're making me sign a loan agreement with my own daughter?" he said, his voice filled with hurt and anger. "We're family, not business partners." "Yes, as family, we need to be clear to protect our relationship," I explained. He finally agreed, but his signature on the contract seemed reluctant, as if I had betrayed him. The $60,000 from my savings account, the result of years of careful saving, was transferred, even though I doubted the project would succeed. I hoped the contract would hold my father accountable and perhaps make him take the job more seriously. Over the next few weeks, things looked better. Dad sent photos of the repairs and shared emails about ordering materials. Mom, Clara, expressed cautious hope about Dad's newfound determination. I allowed myself to believe that, despite the risk, this investment might restore Dad's confidence and bring stability to the family. But then, on the wedding day, disaster struck. The July morning in Durham was bright and perfect. The bridesmaids arrived early at my hotel room, bearing juices and pastries. The photographer captured candid moments as the hair and makeup artists helped us get ready. My mother, Clara, had arrived the night before, staying in a nearby room, her demeanor cheerful but restrained. "Your father is out," she explained when I asked about his arrival time. "He wants to check on a construction site first." By midday, though the wedding was scheduled for 4 p.m., my father, Robert, had not yet appeared or returned a call. My mother grew increasingly anxious, checking her phone. I quietly went outside to call my father, but no one answered. The atmosphere at the wedding became heavy as my mother's unease spread to the bridesmaids. Finally, my phone rang, showing my father's number. I answered it immediately, stepping into a corner to talk privately. "Where is Dad? Mom is worried sick." Dad's voice was strained, mixed with the sound of the car engine behind him. "I'm in Charleston. There's a problem with the project." "What problem? I have to be here. You're getting married in 3 hours." "I know, and I'm trying to fix it quickly," he replied. "Michael's having a big problem with the house. The electrical system is shorted and there's a fire hazard. If we don't fix it right away, we could lose our entire investment." I was stunned. "You mean I can miss the wedding?" "I need your help," he continued. "The electrician wants $12,000 in by the end of the week to fix it. Michael isn't here. The other investor hasn't responded, and the project account won't be funded until Tuesday." The offer hung in the air, the implication clear. He wanted more money on my wedding day. "If it wasn't an emergency, I wouldn't have asked," he insisted. "This is to protect your investment, too. If this house is destroyed, our $60,000 is gone." Outside, friends laughed, wedding music played softly, and glasses clinked. My wedding dress hung near the window, light filtering through the sheer veil. Two opposing worlds collided: the happy future I was entering and the troubles of the past that refused to let go. "Dad, I can't deal with this today," I said. "Whatever it is, we'll deal with it later." "The house could burn down after today," he countered. "I'm just asking for an emergency loan, which will be added to our contract." No, I said firmly, surprising myself with my own determination. Not today. Today, I need you to be my father, not a business partner in crisis. Get in the car and go to Durham. We'll deal with this after the wedding. There was a heavy silence. Then my father, Robert, turned cold. If this project fails because you didn't help, it's your fault. The $60,000 will be gone because you were selfish and didn't support your family in a time of need. That's not fair, I began, but he cut me off. You know what, Emily? If your wedding is more important than our survival, then go for it. But don't expect me to fake smile in your wedding photos or dance at the reception. What are you talking about? His ultimatum came without hesitation. Wire the money within 2 hours or don't come home again. I'm not your beggar. The shock left me speechless. When I found my voice, I replied, calm despite my turmoil. I love you, Dad, but I can't be pressured, especially not today. I hope you'll change your mind and come to us, but I'll understand if you can't. I hung up before he could say more, my hands shaking as I put the phone down. I stood in the corner, trying to compose myself, then turned back to the bridesmaids. My mother, Clara, immediately sensed something was wrong. I pulled her aside and whispered my father's ultimatum. Her face was pale, filled with horror. He can't be serious, she said softly. Let me call him back. She walked out and returned 10 minutes later, her eyes red, her smile strained. He won't come, Emily. I'm sorry. The wedding took place without my father. My mother walked me down the aisle, small but determined, despite the whispers about my father's absence. When the pastor asked who would present the bride, my mother's voice trembled but did not break. I represent the family. James's eyes were filled with nothing but love as we exchanged vows, his steady presence a fulcrum amid the storm of emotions. We danced, cut the cake, and thanked our guests, a ceremony that was formally perfect. Only those closest to me noticed the sadness I hid behind my smile, or understood why the father-daughter dance had been quietly dropped from the program. Mom left the reception early, claiming fatigue, but it was clear she wanted to get back to Charleston to face Dad. Her goodbye hug was full of it all: apology, sympathy, and pain. Your dad loves you, she whispered. He's just lost somewhere. On our wedding night, James held me as I let out the tears I'd been holding back all day. I don't recognize Dad anymore, I confessed, and I don't know how to help someone who keeps pushing me away. We'll figure it out, James promised, though we both knew the road ahead would be difficult. Key West, Florida greeted us with cool ocean breezes and sparkling water, a perfect paradise for newlyweds. Our room was at a resort overlooking the bay, with swaying palm trees like a picture postcard. Had it not been for the family issues that had plagued us, our honeymoon would have been a dream come true. But reality crept in. Despite my best efforts, I kept checking my phone, hoping for a text from my father, Robert. An apology, an explanation, any sign that his harsh ultimatum had been an impulse, not a real one. But there was nothing. My mother, Clara, texted every day, but it was a general update, carefully avoiding any mention of the wedding incident or my father's current condition. James noticed my distraction but didn't force it. Instead, he quietly found ways to bring me back to the present moment. Impromptu picnics on deserted beaches, couple spa sessions, stargazing by the sea at night. His patience and understanding only highlighted the stress I was feeling from my family. You deserve better than this, he said one evening as we watched the sun set over the bay. Your parents are adults, responsible for their choices. You've done more than most people will ever do. Intellectually, I knew James was right, but internally I was torn between duty and guilt. Years of attachment to the image of a harmonious family were hard to let go of. We'll figure this out when we get home, I told myself, trying to focus on the rest of the trip. They've survived this long without me fixing everything. Another week won't hurt. That resolve held until the 4th day before we left Key West, when an urgent email from my cousin Anna, with a link to the Charleston Business Review, startled me. The headline immediately shattered the honeymoon mood. Charleston contractor faces fraud allegations in low-cost home remodeling scheme. The article detailed allegations against Michael Bennett, who allegedly collected investment money for home renovation projects, but did little to fix them, diverting the money for personal expenses. The homes remained largely untouched, while the investment money evaporated. At least 5 families filed complaints, with estimated losses exceeding $400,000. My hands trembled as I read each line, realizing this was the exact scenario I had feared when my father, Robert, first mentioned the project. The wedding emergency was probably just an excuse to ask for more money. The $60,000 I had wired my father was almost certainly gone. James stood behind me, reading over my shoulder, his hand squeezing my shoulder comfortingly. "I'm sorry, Emily. Do you want to leave early?" I thought for a moment, then shook my head. "There's nothing I can do now. Let's just finish the trip as planned. Don't let this ruin everything." The honeymoon ended under a dark cloud. Though I tried my best to enjoy my last moments with James, my heart was heavy. The flight back to Durham was not just a journey from vacation to reality, it also marked the transition to a new phase in my life, a marriage that began amid family rifts. 5 days after my honeymoon, as I was slowly settling back into my routine in Durham, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the crack in the door, I saw my mother, Clara, standing alone, her appearance shocking me. Always neat, she looked haggard, her hair disheveled, her clothes rumpled and hanging loosely on her thin frame. "Mom?" I opened the door, worry rising. "What's wrong? Why didn't you call?" She entered, clutching her handbag as if it were a shield. "I didn't want your father to stop me," she said softly, almost in a whisper. The living room seemed to shrink as she sat on the edge of the sofa, refusing my offer of water or coffee. Her hands were twisted together in her lap, her wedding ring loosely around her thin finger. "Your father doesn't know I'm here," she began, her voice weak. "He'd be furious if he knew." "What's wrong with him? Is there trouble?" She smiled, her face weary. "Both, I guess, but not in the way you think." The story slowly emerged, each painful piece of truth like sharp shards of broken glass. The investment with Michael Bennett had collapsed. The deals he'd promised were either inflated or outright fake. The homes he'd shown needed far more serious repairs than advertised, and many had foundation problems that made them money pits. The police had interviewed Dad the day before. According to Mom, they didn't suspect him of any involvement in the scam, only that he was a victim, but the $60,000 was gone. Michael, it turned out, had fled South Carolina the week before. I took the news in with a strange sense of pain and not surprise because I had suspected it all along. "Mom, I'm sorry about the investment," I said carefully, "but we can get through this financially. What I don't understand is why you look so exhausted." She burst into tears, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It's not just the investment, Emily, it's everything. The house is going into foreclosure. We have 45 days before the auction." Her voice cracked. I sat down next to her, handing her a tissue, waiting patiently for her to calm down. "Your dad, he's a gambling addict," she finally admitted. "It started a long time ago, small bets on basketball games. I thought it was just fun. But then he went to casinos when he was traveling, cashed out credit cards, borrowed money from friends." Each word felt like a punch to the chest. The father who had taught me how to budget, checked my savings spreadsheets, and stressed the consequences of debt had turned out to be living a double life, riddled with drugs and lies. "How long has this been going on?" I asked, my mind reeling as I searched my memories for clues I had missed. "At least 8 years, my mother, Clara, confessed, her voice shaking. "Things got worse after your father was demoted during the layoffs at the shipyard. The pressure and his damaged self-esteem drove him to gamble to feel in control." My mother's words matched the changes I'd noticed during my college visits home. My father, Robert, had become increasingly irritable, my mother had become hyper-anxious, and there was unexplained financial stress. I'd thought it was a normal sign of a maturing family, but it turned out to be the result of a lurking addiction. "Dad lost his job last year because the workshop was downsizing," she continued, her voice fading. "He was fired for misusing partners' funds. They agreed not to sue him if he left quietly." The secrets continued to surface. The medical bills included not only Mom's arthritis, but also Dad's stress treatment and a hospital stay after he collapsed at a casino. The family home was in disrepair, not because of time, but because Mom and Dad had diverted maintenance money to pay off gambling debts. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, hurt and worried. "How many times have I asked what's going on?" Mom's shoulders slumped, her eyes filled with regret. "At first, I wanted to protect the family honor. Then I thought I was shielding you from disappointment in Dad. But then I got so caught up in the lies that the truth became too hard to tell. Mom looked up at me, her eyes tired and sunken. I tolerated your dad's gambling addiction for too long, making excuses, hiding, pretending everything was going to be okay. I was wrong, Emily. I'm sorry. Clara's mother's apology was both incomplete and heartbreakingly sincere. The woman who had taught me about love and family responsibility sat before me, admitting her part in a spiral of dysfunction that nearly destroyed us. "What's going on now, Mom?" I asked, trying to shift into problem-solving mode to contain the turmoil inside me. The pressing issue, beyond the failed investments and the threat of losing our home, was my father, Robert, who stubbornly refused to admit his gambling addiction despite mounting evidence. The emergency on our wedding day had turned out to be an excuse to cover up a major gambling loss. When the money ran out, he went deeper, using the family's last credit card to pay off the debt. "He's not the man I married," Mom whispered, her voice cracking. "He's not the father you knew." When I started gathering my financial documents after the police interview, Dad accused me of spying on him, of conspiring against him. Mom left with only her bag, and now, on our dining room table, papers were scattered. Bank statements with constant cash withdrawals, credit card bills full of advances, service charges from casinos, and debt collection notices from personal loans I never knew about. "I don't know what to do anymore," Mom confessed, her voice broken. "But I can't pretend everything's okay anymore." James arrived home amid the tension, quickly grasping the situation and quietly offering support. With the logic of a programmer, he sorted the chaotic pile of financial documents into clear categories while providing compassionate comfort, making room for his mother's emotional revelations. That night, we faced harsh realities. My mother, Clara, could not return to Charleston immediately, especially since my father, Robert, was still in a state of disarray. She would stay in our apartment in Durham, sleeping in the living room for now. The foreclosure required immediate professional intervention, far beyond my ability to handle on my own. The biggest challenge was my father's gambling addiction, which he was not yet ready to acknowledge or treat. As I prepared the living room, laid out new sheets, and found an extra phone charger, the gravity of the situation became clear to me. The wedding and honeymoon were supposed to be the beginning of my new family journey. Instead, they were overshadowed by the collapse of my parents' lives. "I'm sorry, Emily," Mom said from the doorway, watching me tuck the corner of the duvet away. "This isn't something you should have to deal with when you're newlyweds." The apology stirred a sudden anger in me, not because Mom was here, but because of the years of hiding the truth that had led to this crisis. "What I needed was honesty, Mom," I said. "If you'd told me sooner, we could have stopped it before it got this bad." Mom nodded, accepting the blame without protest. "You're right. I let fear make us all cowards." After Mom went to bed, James and I sat at the kitchen table, a pile of financial papers in front of us that told a story of lies and slow decline. "What do you want to do next?" James asked, his voice simple but meaningful. The question touched on everything. Mom's situation, Dad's addiction, the risk of losing the house, the investment gone, and our financial future now in jeopardy. "I don't know," I admitted, my usually professional voice laced with uncertainty. "I help clients through financial crises every day, but this is different. It's so personal, so chaotic, and there's no perfect solution." James took my hand across the table, his gaze steady. "We don't have to work things out tonight, but whatever you decide, I'll be here." His steadiness was a crutch amid unfamiliar emotions. Betrayal by a father I once admired. Worry for a mother who had always supported me. Anger at the lies that had been told, and uncertainty about setting the right boundaries. "One thing I'm sure of," I said finally. "We can't go on like we did before. Any help from now on will have to be different, because the old way doesn't work, and it might even make things worse." That night set in motion a new approach, one that required professional intervention, painful confrontations, and the reshaping of family relationships. The path forward was uncertain, but the commitment to change was firmly in place. Taking emergency leave just weeks after my honeymoon wasn't ideal, but my supervisor at Durham was surprisingly understanding when I shared my situation. "Addiction crises in families are more common than you think," she said, granting my request. "Take the time you need to get things right." The next 3 days passed in a chaotic series of appointments and phone calls. I contacted a financial counselor from the Employee Assistance Program who recommended a forensic accountant who specialized in handling gambling related family issues. That counselor connected us with an attorney experienced in preventing foreclosures. The attorney recommended a family therapist who worked with addiction specialists. Each played a role in the comprehensive plan to address my parents' complex crisis. All emphasized a core message. Recovery depended on my father, Robert, being willing to change, not just on financial support or legal solutions. My mother, Clara, stayed with us throughout this preparation, swinging between determination to help and overwhelming guilt. At times, she was busy filing papers and making phone calls, and at other times, she sat staring blankly out the window, consumed with self-reproach for having tolerated my father's gambling addiction for so long. I should have confronted him years ago, she repeated at one point. When the money was small, when he had a job, when he might have listened. James replied gently, I can't change the past, but I'm taking action now, and that's what matters. Meanwhile, my father had largely cut off contact. His text to my mother alternated between angry criticism and calculated apologies, a pattern that addiction experts say is characteristic of someone who isn't ready to acknowledge a problem. He ignored my calls completely, as if the wedding ultimatum was still in effect. On the fifth day, we assembled what James called an intervention team, consisting of a financial expert, an addiction counselor, a family therapist, and an attorney. Together, we developed a systematic plan to address both the immediate financial crisis and my father, Robert's addiction. The addiction counselor emphasized in the meeting that any financial support must be conditional on participation in treatment. Otherwise, you're just setting the stage for the next gamble, he said. The plan forced me to change my mindset, to set firm boundaries with clear consequences, rather than to continue to provide support without control. The experts helped me see that this was not coldness, but the necessary foundation for a family to heal. On Saturday morning, the intervention team arrived at my parents' house in Charleston after coordinating with my mother, Clara, to ensure that my father would be present. She told him only that a financial advisory group would be coming to discuss foreclosure, masking the true nature of the meeting. The house I grew up in looked even more rundown, with an overgrown yard and peeling paint on the windows. My father opened the door, his eyes suspicious. He had grown noticeably thinner since our last visit, his cheeks hollow, a scraggly beard covering his once sleek face. What's going on? He asked, his voice strained as the group entered the living room. I thought it was just the bankers. Mom stepped forward, her voice calmer than ever. Robert, we need to talk about everything that's going on, not just the house. Dad's eyes swept over everyone, stopping on me, a mixture of resentment and shame. You brought the whole team here to humiliate us? No, Dad, I said, my voice calm, repeating my carefully prepared words. I'm here to help, and so are everyone here. But real help means facing the real issues. The addiction counselor spoke up, introducing himself and explaining the purpose of the meeting. Dad's face hardened as he realized what was being said. This is an intervention? You think I'm an addict in need of help? Gambling is a recognized mental disorder, the addiction counselor explained, her voice calm but firm. The treatments are similar to other addiction treatment programs. My father, Robert, turned to my mother, Clara, her face betrayed. You told them about your family's private matters. I'm just telling the truth, my mother replied, her hands shaking but her voice firm. We should have faced this a long time ago, Robert. The next few hours were the most difficult of my life. The financial expert presented documents of Dad's gambling behavior spanning nearly a decade. Cash withdrawals that coincided with casino trips, credit card advances, and loans from questionable sources. The total loss exceeded $150,000, not counting a recent $60,000 investment. It's my money. I have the right to spend it, Dad insisted when confronted with the evidence. Not when it threatens the stability of the family, the financial expert countered. Not when it comes from loans or fraud. The attorney presented the foreclosure situation, which was worse than we had thought. The bank had set an auction date with little chance of delay due to previous adjustments. She stressed that there were options, but that immediate action and complete financial transparency were needed. Throughout the discussion, my father engaged in the usual addict's defenses: denial, minimization, blame, and anger. He called the gambling losses entertainment expenses or business investments. He blamed the job market, the unscrupulous casinos, and his family's lack of support. When these arguments failed, he turned to personal attacks. "It's easy for you to judge from your fancy office in Durham," he snapped at me. "You don't know what real stress is." "It's not about judgment," I replied, keeping my voice calm as I had prepared. "It's about finding the right way to help a situation that is hurting all of us, especially Dad." The addiction counselor guided the conversation skillfully, keeping the conversation focused on the core issue, not letting negative emotions derail the goal of the intervention. Each expert presented his or her assessment with candor but empathy, acknowledging my family's pain without condoning lies. Finally, we came to the crux of the matter, setting out the conditions for any future financial support. The forensic accountant drew up a detailed plan to address the immediate crisis and build long-term stability, with my support tied to a specific commitment from my parents. "We can save the house," I said, "but only if my parents agree to these conditions." The conditions included: 1. My father, Robert, must attend a structured gambling rehabilitation program. 2. Both my father and mother, Clara, must attend financial counseling. 3. All accounts must be transparent and jointly managed. 4. A repayment plan for the $60,000 loan that had been made, however symbolic. Years, attend regular family therapy sessions to rebuild trust. Mom nodded in agreement to each condition, but Dad's face darkened. "So you're using money to control us?" he asked, his voice bitter as if I were blackmailing my own father. "No," the family therapist intervened. "This is a boundary, not a threat. Emily is offering significant support, but with conditions that ensure the help actually addresses the problem, not perpetuates it." "And if I don't agree?" Dad challenged, looking straight at me. The moment I feared had come. The addiction counselor had prepared me for this, emphasizing that recovery could not begin without Dad seeing the consequences. "In that case, I will still support your needs," I said, my voice firm. "But I will not provide the money to continue gambling, and I will not enter into any irresponsible financial arrangements." "You would let us lose our house after all we have done for you?" Dad countered, his voice thick with accusation. The blame game that had worked was now met with measured resistance. "I am suggesting a way to save the house, but it must be accompanied by treatment of the underlying problem," I said. "That is the most meaningful help I can offer." My father's anger flared. He accused me of betrayal, reminded me of my parents' sacrifices, and claimed I had abandoned family loyalty for cold-blooded financial calculations. The verbal onslaught continued until my mother spoke up, her voice cutting through with surprising authority. "Robert, enough," she said. "Listen to yourself. This is our daughter who is trying to help even though we have hurt her. I have spent years excusing your behavior, covering up your mistakes, pretending everything is okay. I can't do this anymore." Father looked at Mother as if she were a stranger. "You're on her side? Against your husband?" "There are no sides," Mother said. "There's only reality and denial. I choose reality, and I hope you will too." Tension hung in the room as my father, Robert, visibly struggled to maintain a united front against his denial. Finally, he stood up, his face hard. "I need to go," he said, walking quickly toward the door. The addiction counselor had warned him of this possibility. "People in intervention often choose to leave rather than accept immediate help," he explained. "Let him go," he advised gently. "He needs time to think. This is just the beginning of a long journey." Dad stopped in the doorway, turned to look at me, his eyes cold. "I didn't raise you to be this cruel." The words cut like a knife, though I had braced myself for emotional manipulation. "I love you, Dad," I said, my voice firm. "That's why I'm here, instead of just leaving." Dad left without another word, closing the door softly but firmly, a quiet declaration rather than an angry act. In the silence that followed, my mother, Clara, slumped, exhaustion replacing tension. "What now?" she asked, her voice hollow. The addiction counselor outlined next steps: maintain a consistent approach, continue to seek treatment when Dad was ready, and put financial protections in place regardless of whether he participated. The attorney presented temporary solutions to delay foreclosure, while the team sought a permanent solution. "What about you?" I asked my mother privately as the experts packed up the papers. "Are you staying here tonight?" She looked around the house, where decades of memories were intertwined with new truths. "No, I'm going to stay with my aunt for a while, she said. A little distance might help your father and I think things through. When the intervention team left, I stayed behind to help my mother prepare a few necessary items. Our quiet movements were in stark contrast to the emotional intensity of the previous few hours. In the bedroom, my mother, Clara, paused before a photograph on her dressing table. It was my parents' 20th wedding anniversary, both smiling brightly at the party I had thrown. The joy in the photo now seemed to belong to strangers. I still love him, she said softly. The man in this photo. The father who taught you how to ride a bike and checked your math homework. I wonder if he's still there in your father now. I had no answer for that deep unease. Instead, I helped my mother pack, drove her to her aunt's house outside Charleston, and then returned to Durham, emotionally drained but strangely clear. Today's confrontation was painful but necessary, shattering the illusions that had made things worse over the years. James waited for me at home, eyes worried as he held me. "How bad is it?" he asked. "As bad as we expected," I admitted. "Dad left. Mom stayed with her aunt and nothing was really resolved," James pointed out gently. "But the truth has come out. Even if your dad isn't ready to face it, it's a start." That night, lying awake beside my sleeping husband, I thought about what had happened. My father, Robert, once the perfect model in my eyes, was now showing his deep and very human flaws. Our childhood home, a symbol of security, now faced an uncertain future. The family identity I had once cherished was completely changed, but amid these painful realizations came a sudden clarity. For years, I had tried to solve my parents' problems with money and avoidance, only to create greater turmoil. Today's intervention, painful as it was, helped us face reality instead of clinging to comfortable illusions. 4 months passed with little contact from my father, Robert. The addiction counselor assured me that this was not unusual, explaining that people in intervention often needed time to deal with the consequences before accepting help. My mother, Clara, called regularly from her aunt's house outside Charleston, sharing that she and my father occasionally texted, but had not had any in-depth conversations about treatment or reconciliation. Meanwhile, professional efforts progressed on several fronts. The attorney negotiated a temporary stay on the foreclosure, provided I secured a structured payment plan. The financial counselor worked with my mother to clarify their finances, uncovering more hidden debts and identifying assets that could help stabilize the situation. The therapist held weekly counseling sessions with my mother, helping her gradually move from blaming herself to understanding her codependent dynamics. I returned to work in Durham, explaining the situation to my boss in technical terms, but not hiding the personal impact. Her unwavering support was invaluable as I tried to balance my work responsibilities and the family crisis. James also showed great understanding, taking care of the house during my frequent trips to Charleston and being an emotional anchor when things got too much. Despite the support, the mental toll manifested itself in physical symptoms: migraines, insomnia, and difficulty concentrating in client meetings. My family therapist recommended individual counseling, an idea I initially resisted but eventually accepted when my work performance suffered. "You can't help others if you're exhausted yourself," the therapist observed in our first session. "Even financial advisors need an emotional balance sheet." This comment helped me recognize my patterns: perfectionism, taking on too much responsibility, and an identity tied to problem solving. Traits like perfectionism and responsibility, which had been my strengths in my work, became burdens when dealing with addiction in my family. Over time, I learned to set healthier boundaries, understanding that supporting recovery did not mean controlling every outcome. The first step with my father, Robert, came unexpectedly in January, about 5 months into the intervention. An unfamiliar phone number with a Charleston area code popped up on the screen. "Is this Emily Harper?" a female voice asked when I picked up. "Yes," I answered cautiously. "This is Laura Mitchell, a counselor at Coastal Recovery Center in South Carolina. Your father, Robert Harper, has given me permission to contact you." The center wasn't on the list we'd suggested, but Laura explained that Dad had come to us after hitting rock bottom financially and emotionally. He'd started an inpatient program 3 weeks earlier, finally admitting to a gambling addiction after a big loss left him short of money to pay his rent. "He's working hard," Laura said. "Part of recovery is making amends. He wanted to know if you'd be willing to come to a supervised family meeting next week." The suggestion raised both hope and anxiety. The family therapist advised me to be cautiously optimistic, emphasizing that recovery involves repairing relationships, but cautioning against setting expectations too high from the start. The meeting took place in a small tea shop near the treatment center, a neutral space. Dad arrived with his counselor, Laura. He looked much better than the last time I saw him. A healthy diet and steady sleep had helped him regain some of his strength, though his emotional healing journey was clearly still ongoing. The conversation began awkwardly, with only pleasantries to cover the deeper concerns. Counselor Laura guided us skillfully, allowing space for my father, Robert, to try out his new communication skills, while also helping me maintain my established boundaries. "I was unfair to you," he admitted after a few minutes. "Not just on our wedding day, but over the years, I have blamed you for the boundaries I should have set for myself." This admission, though incomplete, was a big step forward from previous encounters. Dad clearly still struggled with a direct apology, his pride still at odds with his recovery principles, but he expressed remorse for specific actions without getting defensive. "The investment was my fault," he said bluntly. "I was in such a hurry, desperate for a quick way out, that I didn't check it out. Then I tried to push you for more money instead of facing failure." I struck a balance as my therapist had advised, acknowledging my father's efforts without erasing the wounds or treating them as insurmountable obstacles. When the session ended, we agreed to continue communicating as my father's treatment progressed, rebuilding our relationship step by step rather than expecting immediate reconciliation. "It's strange," I said to James afterward. "Part of me wants to believe that everything is okay, but the other part is skeptical." He nodded. "Both feelings are valid, Emily. Trust is built with small steps, not big actions." In the months that followed, changes began to take shape in many aspects of the family crisis. My mother, Clara, found a part-time job at a public library in Charleston. The flexible schedule suited her condition, providing a small income and a new sense of purpose. My father completed inpatient treatment and moved to an intensive outpatient program and took a sales job at a hardware store. This was a much lower-paying job than his previous role as a shipyard foreman, but a job his counselor had recommended to help ease the stress of his initial recovery. Despite their best efforts, the family home in Charleston could not be saved. Accumulated debts and missed payments had created an impossible financial equation that no plan could solve. This outcome, once unthinkable, became a necessary step toward long-term financial stability. Attorneys negotiated a voluntary surrender agreement in lieu of eviction, allowing enough time for my parents to resettle. My mother, Clara, found a small apartment near her aunt's house, furnished with basic items from the old house and a few practical housewarming gifts from relatives. My father, Robert, initially stayed at a shelter affiliated with a treatment program, before moving into a low-cost studio apartment that fit his limited budget. The $60,000 loan agreement for the failed investment project remains in place, but with adjusted expectations. Dad commits to making monthly payments of $40, a small token amount that acknowledges the debt without placing too much financial strain on the early stages of recovery. The addiction counselor supports this approach, emphasizing that financial responsibility is an important part of recovery, even if full repayment may not be possible right away. Family therapy sessions continued, sometimes with mom or dad alone, sometimes both, depending on the situation. These carefully guided conversations opened up space to confront buried issues: mom's resentment at years of financial deception, dad's shame over his gambling addiction, my anger at the manipulation on our wedding day, and our shared grief over the loss of our family home. Recovery is not just about stopping the addictive behavior, the therapist explained. It's also about healing the relationship patterns that were damaged by it. The process was uneven, with advances and setbacks. My mother and I gradually rebuilt our intimacy based on honesty rather than the concealment of our past. The relationship with my father improved in some ways, but remained strained, especially when it came to finances. My parents' marriage was in limbo, not fully reconciled, but not yet broken, as they lived separately and maintained sporadic contact. Throughout this time, James showed incredible patience and support, never complaining despite the constant family crises that intruded on our newlywed life. His perspective provided a valuable balance whenever emotions clouded my judgment. After one particularly tense session, where old resentments resurfaced, he remarked, "Not everything is perfect, but we are moving in better directions. That's a big step forward." A year after the intervention, we gathered at a small restaurant in Charleston to celebrate my mother Clara's birthday. The dinner was simple but meaningful, a celebration of difficult achievements. My father Robert arrived on time, carrying a small bouquet of flowers bought with his honest paycheck. My mother accepted them with a genuine smile, rather than her usual anxious expression. I watched them talk quietly, sensing a cautious optimism as I recognized the positive signs behind the slightly embarrassed exterior. Over dessert, my father discreetly showed me his 10-month sober badge. Pride shone in the small symbol of his commitment. The milestone had not been easy. He had relapsed after 2 months, but the setback had strengthened his resolve rather than discouraged him. One day at a time, he said, echoing the core mantra of his recovery program. Some days are harder, but every day is worth it. My family developments paralleled my career success. The focus and resilience I developed through personal challenges became a professional advantage, leading to my promotion to senior finance manager in Durham with an ever-expanding client list. James's programming career progressed in parallel, helping us gradually regain financial stability after a $60,000 loss from a failed venture. Mom's birthday dinner ended with a surprise. I announced my pregnancy after a heated conversation about our family's slowly recovering future. The news brought pure joy, temporarily dispelling the complexities of a new beginning. I want to be a grandfather your grandchildren can be proud of, my father, Robert, said softly as we parted, his voice betraying the sincerity that had dominated the past years. You're on the right track, I replied, acknowledging his progress without denying the challenges that lay ahead. The journey of the past year has profoundly changed my understanding of family dynamics, the impact of addiction, and the difference between genuine support and misguided abetting. The lessons have become clear, shaping the way I approach both my personal relationships and my financial advisory work. Addiction is not just a problem for the addict, in this case my father's gambling, but a storm that affects everyone around him, requiring the entire family to recover. Financial support without accountability, even if well-intentioned, often only prolongs the problem rather than solves it. Money I give without clear conditions has inadvertently fueled the crisis. The intervention of professionals, addiction counselors, financial experts, and therapists provided perspectives and solutions that my family could not have found on their own. Recovery is not just about stopping addictive behaviors, but also about grieving what has been lost. Our home, our old relationships, and our idealized family, and rebuilding from what remains. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting or pretending that the hurt never happened. Balancing responsibility and compassion is an ongoing process, not a one-time decision. The healing process does not follow a fixed path or a convenient schedule. The pace of recovery has been uneven, frustrating at times, but it has taught me patience and perseverance. The boundaries I set are not cold, but expressions of love, directed toward health rather than dysfunction. Limit setting has proven to be a deeper care than the unconditional financial support I once provided. As I prepare to become a mother, these lessons nurture my hope for a family with healthier patterns for my child. The child who is about to be born will inherit a complicated family history, but also the wisdom that comes from facing the truth rather than avoiding it. Our story is not yet complete. My father Robert's journey of recovery is still in its infancy. My mother Clara's independence is taking shape. The financial consequences are still present in many forms. But amid these challenges, a real healing process has begun, one that offers hope based on facing reality with the right support. On the way home from my mother's birthday party, James asked, "What's the biggest lesson you've learned this year?" I pondered, trying to find the core truth amid the many insights. "Love sometimes requires hard choices," I replied. "Not the easy ones or the ones that make people happy right now, but the ones that honor the truth and promote long-term health, even if the moment hurts." This wisdom may not have seemed to encompass everything we'd been through, but it marked a major shift in how I viewed relationships and challenges. The most loving actions are sometimes not the easy ones, but the ones that hold the truth while maintaining connection. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision because it was the right thing, even though it hurt? Or supported a loved one through addiction or financial hardship? Share your story in the comments. Your experience may be a light for others facing similar challenges. If this story resonates with you, be sure to like, follow, and share with those who need to hear that setting boundaries with family is sometimes the most loving act. Thank you for listening. And remember that healing is possible, even after the deepest hurts.